will be women.
Watch Gravitas.
Welcome and thanks for tuning in.
We don't impose our views.
Did India threaten to ban Twitter? Either that or Jack Dorsey is lying to you.
That is Gravitas. We let life breathe through our show. Gravitas, the informed show for an intelligent audience.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching WION The World is One. This is another edition of World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of others. I'm Shivan Jonna.
And on the show today, we tell you that the US Congress on Thursday, on December 14th, approved a staggering defense budget of $886 billion for 2024. And the defense policy will also authorize $300 million for Kyiv. The bill also provides billions of dollars to enhance U.S. deterrence and defense posture in the Indo-Pacific region and counter China's rising influence. We will bring you all the details on this on the show today and a lot more.
Also on the show, after a disappointing visit to the US where Zelensky could not close, Zelensky found a reason to smile at the EU summit in a breakthrough for Ukraine. European Union leaders agreed to open membership talks for Ukraine despite months of opposition from Hungary. Zelensky has hailed it as a victory already, while the Hungarian Prime Minister was not at all pleased and walked out. We will be tracking all the developments right here on World DNA in the next 60 minutes. Let's get you started with the headlines first.
Netanyahu says that he's more determined than ever to continue the war with Hamas, even as the top White House advisor Jake Sullivan says that scale down Gaza offensive.
US Congress passes $886 billion defense policy bill focus on countering China in Indo-Pacific and a controversial warrantless surveillance of foreign nationals.
European Union leaders agree to officially open accession negotiations for Ukraine. Massive breakthrough for Kyiv as it tries to bolster support from allies.
Authorities arrest 7, including 4 suspected Hamas members in Denmark, Germany and Netherlands on suspicion of planning attacks on Jewish institutions in Europe.
Guyana and Venezuela leaders meet as Caribbean region pushes to defuse a territorial dispute over oil-rich region.
Captain Surya Kumar Yadav smashes a brilliant 100 and Kuldeep Yadav picks a 5-wicket haul as India square the T20 series against South Africa with a 106-run win.
A thrilling innings, really.
Now, a possible rematch between President Biden and former President Trump is not exciting many Americans, despite the candidates holding wide leads in their respective parties.
And Republicans are more satisfied about having Trump as their party's standard bearer than Democrats are with having Biden as the party's 2024 nominee.
Now, according to a new poll from the Associated Press, NORC Center for Public Affairs Research, 58% would be dissatisfied if Donald Trump was the Republican nominee. 56% would be dissatisfied if Joe Biden was on the ticket for the Democrats. 68% of adults are pessimistic about the state of politics in the United States. About half lack confidence that either political parties' process for selecting their nominees will be fair.
Now, the apathy from voters comes even as both Biden and Trump are facing relatively few obstacles in their path to lock down their respective parties' nominations next year. And Biden has amassed broad support from Democratic officials as a handful of mostly token primary challengers have struggled to spark momentum. And this despite 91 indictments across 4 criminal cases, including some centered on his attempts to overturn his electoral loss to Biden in 2020. Trump is still going strong. The former U.S. president's grip on grand old party primary voters shows no signs of loosening a month before the first nominating contest in Iowa.
Among Democrats and Republicans alike, having a candidate who can win is given slightly more importance than having a candidate whose views represent most people in the party or even themselves.
I didn't say I'm going to do this. I don't care if she endorses me or not.
Now, how likely is it that a third-party candidate can make a significant impact in the 2024 election? Our correspondent in New York, Susan Teherani, answers this. Take a look.
It seems like it's going to be the rematch no one asked for, but will be getting anyway. The 2024 presidential race seems to be all set to be a rematch between U.S. President Joe Biden and his predecessor, Donald Trump. However, polls indicate that most Americans don't like their options. Some are open to a third-party candidate. However, history has shown that that's a long shot. But what if it's different this time? Well, it's too soon to tell, but West Virginia Democrat Senator Joe Manchin is exploring a third-party bid. He hasn't announced it yet, but he's embarking on a 2-month national tour to gauge support. Manchin says he's a centrist and feels politically homeless. He'll be looking for others who feel the same. He dealt a heavy blow to Democrats when announcing earlier a planned retirement from his Senate seat. Now Democrats will have to see if they'll struggle to keep that seat in 2024. But will he also be a spoiler in the 2024 presidential election? Or will he even prevail? We'll have to wait and see.
Now, U.S. Congress has approved a new defense policy bill for the U.S. Sean gets you all the details. Over.
Thanks, Aditi. Of course, we are looking at this new defense budget which has come in from the U.S. Let's start right off. U.S. House and Senate have approved a $886.3 billion defense policy bill, and the nearly 3,100-page National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2024 will now go to President Joe Biden for his signature. Let's take a look at what all the $886 billion defense bill entails. Now, to begin with, the package would authorize $14.7 billion for the Pacific Deterrence Initiative to counter Chinese aggression. It would establish a training, advising and institutional capacity building program for the military forces of Taiwan. It would enable the implementation of the AUKUS agreement between the US, United Kingdom and Australia, and authorize the eventual sale of nuclear-capable submarines to Australia. Now, viewers, it also envisages an increase in the frequency and scale of exercises conducted by the US Indo-Pacific Command. So, as you can see, there is a major focus on the Indo-Pacific region. How much of this will antagonize China? That will be revealed in times to come. Now, the bill includes a short-term extension of a controversial law that it permits warrantless surveillance of foreign nationals, extending authority for the program through April 19. Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act enables the U.S. government to obtain intelligence by collecting communications records of non-Americans overseas who are using U.S.-based communications services. It has come under scrutiny from some lawmakers over alleged misuse. Now, it provides the largest raise for support for service members and their families in more than 2 decades. This entails a 5.2% boost in service members' basic pay. So it also seems like a kind of a motivation for more people to join the forces here. And it authorizes a monthly bonus for junior enlisted members as well. It authorizes $38 million for the budget request for new family housing. To help military spouses, it would allow them to telework when service members transfer locations. Now, it also provides $153 million over the budget request for the construction of new child care centers. Plus, it would authorize the Department of Defense to fund clinical trials using psychedelic substances and cannabis to treat post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injuries. Now, viewers, interestingly, it also bats for ending quote-unquote wokeness in the military. And I'm going to elaborate a bit on that. The package would prohibit funding for the teaching, training or promotion of critical race theory in the military. It would prohibit the display of any unapproved flags. And of course, the LGBTQ multicolored flag is one which is, it is one of them which will not be allowed to be put up. At least in the military installations. It would also put in place a hiring freeze on diversity, equity and inclusion positions until the US Government Accountability Office completes an investigation of the Pentagon's DEI programs. The legislation reiterates that no funds may be spent on drag shows, on drag queen story hours and other similar events. However, funding for a separate $105 billion national security assistance package to Israel and Ukraine, now that continues to be a point of contention in Congress. It has not been cleared, neither for Ukraine, neither for Israel. Zelensky came to the US but had to return with a heartbreak because he did not get any further assurances of aid. He only got promises. Though it does extend a military aid program to Ukraine. As of now, it allows a gradual release of $300 million for Kiev. But the joint package does not include two controversial provisions here related to abortion and transgender health care access, which were in the House Defense Policy Bill that passed this summer. So this is essentially what the new defense policy bill looks like for the US. It's $886 billion, but that $105 billion required for Israel and Ukraine, it is still very much in contention. We will be tracking it very closely. This is World DNA, and back to you, Aditi.
Well, thanks, Shivan, for that thorough overview. Now, let's shift focus to the latest that's coming in from the Israel-Hamas war. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that he's more determined than ever to continue the war with Hamas. And this even as the White House top advisor Jake Sullivan, who's in Israel to negotiate, told him to scale down the Gaza offensive. Sullivan met Netanyahu and the rest of Israel's war cabinet on Thursday, and White House says that he urged Israel to shift from high-intensity military operations to a more targeted phase. And speaking to media, he said that governance of the West Bank and Gaza Strip needs to be connected under a revamped and revitalized Palestinian Authority. Earlier, Israel's defense minister Yoav Gallant said that it will take more than several months to destroy Hamas and that Israel faces mounting international pressure and isolation amidst its onslaught that has killed thousands so far. And even its strongest ally, US, now wants Israel to be careful.
I want them to be focused on how to save civilian lives, not stop going after Hamas, but be more careful.
The president will travel to New Delhi, India to attend the G20 Leaders Summit.
Jake Sullivan will also meet with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah on Friday. And ahead of this meet, the Palestinian PM has expressed disappointment with US veto to UN resolutions calling for ceasefire in Gaza, and has urged the US to act on implementing a two-state solution.
Finland and Sweden submitted their applications for NATO membership. On Thursday,
every American official who arrives here to meet with us, they again repeat the same thing, that United States is for two states. Now that United States has talked the talk, we want Washington to walk the walk. Meaning that we need specific measures to implement the two-state solution, not only believe in two states.
The Israeli President Isaac Herzog, meanwhile, has joined other Israeli officials against a possible two-state solution for long-lasting peace in the region.
In order to get back to the idea of dividing the land or negotiating peace or talking to the Palestinians, etc., one has to deal first and foremost with the emotional trauma that we're going through and the need and demand for full sense of security for our people.
Now, amid the negotiation efforts, Israel still continues with its offensive in Gaza. The Israeli military says that dozens of Hamas fighters surrendered in last 24 hours, while internet and telephone services providers in Gaza said that communications were cut across the war-torn area on Thursday.
On the other hand, Hamas has played down Israel's attempts to flood the group's tunnels in Gaza. It says when militants built them, they took all considerations of what could happen.
Those tunnels were built by well-trained and educated engineers, and they have considered any kind of attacks may happen by the Israelis, including bombing water.
Violence also rages on in West Bank, where Israeli troops killed 12 Palestinians in raids on Thursday inside the city of Jenin. Now, Palestinian authorities accused desecration of a mosque by some Israeli soldiers as it condemned the operation as a dangerous escalation. Israel's army said that it would discipline the soldiers on the reports of desecration.
Seven people have been arrested in Denmark, Germany and the Netherlands for plotting terrorist attacks, and 4 of these arrests have been linked to Hamas.
And in a joint Dutch-German operation, 3 were arrested in Berlin and 1 in the Netherlands. And in a separate incident, 3 others were arrested as terror suspects in Denmark.
The German police in a statement said that all the 4 suspects arrested in the Netherlands and Germany were in direct and close contact with Hamas military branch. The arrests include a Dutch national, 2 Lebanese-born and an Egyptian.
Now, prosecutors have said that one of these suspects was working on curating a list of weapon sources, and these weapons were to be taken to Berlin and kept ready for potential terrorist attacks on Jewish targets.
Hamas has denied any connection to the suspects. It added that the allegations were published with the aim of disrupting the mass support rallies that Palestine has been garnering in Europe.
And Netanyahu also published a statement saying that Hamas has been relentlessly trying to expand its operations to Europe.
Meanwhile, in a parallel incident, 3 people were arrested in Denmark and will be tried under terrorism charges. These arrests, preliminary investigations showed, were not in any way linked to those made in Germany and Netherlands. The Danish police have increased presence near Jewish communities. They said that the raids carried out in cooperation with foreign partners exposed a network of people preparing for a terrorist attack.
Now, EU leaders agreed to open talks with Ukraine on joining the bloc after Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban ducked out of his threat to veto the plan. The European Council President announced the decision, which also included starting negotiations with Moldova as a signal for hope of their people and for the continent.
We want to support Ukraine. It's a very powerful political signal. It's a very powerful political decision. And today and tonight, I think to the people of Ukraine, we are on their side, and this decision made by the member states is extremely important for the credibility of the European Union.
Orban, who had insisted for weeks he would block the move, agreed not to be in the room when the other leaders made a consensus decision. The Hungarian Prime Minister denounced that what he dubbed a completely senseless, irrational and wrong decision. He was completely against it, but he complained that 26 other countries insisted the decision be taken. If he had chosen to use his veto, Orban could have derailed the summit. He backed down one day after the European Commission unlocked $10.4 billion in frozen funds for Hungary.
Now, the EU summit also granted candidate status to Georgia, one step behind formal negotiations. Volodymyr Zelensky, who did not attend the knife-edge summit, hailed the decision as a victory that motivates, inspires and strengthens. And the president said, and I quote, "Moldova turns a new page today with EU's go-ahead for accession talks." And the White House, which faces opposition from Republicans in the United States to its own support for Ukraine, hailed a historic decision. The decision to open membership negotiations with Kyiv provides a major boost for Ukraine as fears swirl over Western support. However, the road remains long to actually joining the EU. And before the talks can be launched, EU states must agree on negotiating framework, giving Orban ample opportunity to stall the process again.
Attention at the summit now focuses on a plan to grant Ukraine a $54 billion funding package from the EU budget that Orban has also threatened to block. Kiev desperately needs the money to prop up its war-torn economy and to change the narrative that backing from its allies is waning. Most EU leaders wanted this week's summit to send a sign of solidarity with Ukraine 22 months after Russia launched an all-out invasion in 2022. But any decisions must be unanimous or at least unopposed. And Orban initially insisted a decision on funding could wait until after June's European elections.
The critics have accused Orban of holding Kyiv's survival hostage in a bid to force Brussels to release billions of euros of EU funds frozen over a rule of law dispute. And as mentioned, the European Commission unlocked $10.4 billion in frozen funds for Hungary on Wednesday. Now, billions still remain out of Orban's grasp, but he denied that Hungary was making a link between the cash and its Ukraine stance. And that's not our style, he said.
The situation on the battlefield in Ukraine does not look promising for Kiev after a counter-offensive fail. Putin boasted on Thursday that he has 617,000 troops in Ukraine and that their positions are improving. Across Brussels, at NATO headquarters, Alliance Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg warned that the West must continue supporting Ukraine in order to protect the rest of Europe. The presidents of Venezuela and Guyana have met in the Caribbean for talks that may de-escalate tensions and resolve their countries' long-standing and now reheating territorial dispute.
And according to officials, both the nations have agreed not to use force to settle their border dispute. According to Guyanese president, both sides are committed to ensuring their region remains peaceful.
We are a peace-abiding country and people.
Somos un país y pueblo.
We have no other ambition
Y no tenemos otra ambición
than to pursue the peaceful coexistence
sino de proseguir la convivencia pacífica
with Venezuela
con Venezuela
and every country in this region.
Disagreement over the 160 square kilometers jungle region of Essequibo has run for decades. But Venezuela has revived its claim recently, and this after major oil and gas discoveries happened. According to Venezuela, the Essequibo region has been part of its territory since the Spanish colonial period.
Now, the dispute is now before the International Court of Justice, and though a final ruling could be years away.
Voters in Venezuela this month have rejected the court's jurisdiction and backed the creation of a new state in a referendum. On the other hand, Guyana has questioned the vote's turnout and said that its land border is not up for discussion. During the meet, President Ali wore a bracelet showing a map of Guyana that includes the Essequibo and has reiterated that the dispute must be solved through the ICJ.
And now it's time for a quick break.
Don't go anywhere. This is World DNA. We will be back after this short break. We will be bringing you more updates from around the globe. On the other side, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to inaugurate the all-new Surat Diamond Bourse or SDB building in the state of Gujarat. The structure will be the world's largest diamond office complex, and we will get you all the details on it.
And there is more coming up. The European Commission has asked technology giants Apple and Google to clarify their App Store risk management. The Commission is requesting them to provide more information on how they have diligently identified any systematic risks concerning the App Store and Google Play. We'll get you all the details right after this short break on World DNA.
Israel woke up to a barrage of thousands of rockets fired from the Gaza Strip.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
Hostilities have broken out between Israel and Palestine, and the tensions that had been gathering steam over the course of the last several weeks and months.
The siren has gone off. I don't know if you can hear in the background what's going on. I'm going into the shelter now. So it's a very, very serious situation here across Israel. It's a state of emergency.
The United States stands with Israel.
Well, we are starting this broadcast with a developing story from West Asia, where Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says Hamas has launched a war against the state of Israel.
It's easy to tell you a flat story. It's easy to show you what's happening around the world.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching World DNA with Aditi and myself, Shivan Charna. We were, of course, bringing you all the updates from the US in the first half hour of the show, where the US Congress has approved a $886.3 billion defense policy bill. There is a major focus on the Indo-Pacific, and we also brought you updates from Europe, where talks for Ukraine's inclusion into the EU have been started. Let's get you started with all that is happening around the globe in the next half hour of World DNA. Let's get you started.
First, let's get you the headlines. Russian President Putin confronts AI double, appears briefly lost for words as AI-generated version questions him over body doubles.
Netanyahu says he is more determined than ever to continue the war with Hamas, even as top White House advisor Jake Sullivan says scale down Gaza offensive.
And US Congress passes $886 billion defense policy bill focusing on countering China in Indo-Pacific and controversial warrantless surveillance of foreign nationals.
European Union leaders agree to officially open accession negotiations for Ukraine. Massive breakthrough for Kiev as it tries to bolster support from allies.
Now, barely a month after asking India to withdraw its military personnel, Maldives decided not to renew the previous government's agreement with India on hydrographic survey of the island nation's waters.
Lionel Messi's shirts from Argentina's World Cup triumph fetch $7.8 million at an auction. But the title of most expensive jersey still belongs to a Michael Jordan jersey from the 1998 NBA Finals.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is all set to inaugurate the all-new Surat Diamond Bourse or SDB building in the state of Gujarat on December 17th. And as the world's largest diamond office complex, it can house nearly 4,500 diamond trading offices.
Several diamond trading firms have already begun operations at the SDB. The complex aims to attract thousands of diamond experts along with diamond cutters, polishers and traders.
And the opening of this diamond office complex comes at a time when the G7 nations have announced a ban on direct import of non-industrial diamonds from Russia. And the ban from January 2024 will cover diamonds mined, processed or produced in Russia. The G7 have outlined phased-in restrictions on indirect imports of Russian gems to begin in early March.
Now, Russia is the world's biggest producer of rough diamonds, and the G7 accounts for 70% of the consumer market. The effect of this ban on Russian diamonds has consequences directly for India, which is home to about 90% of the world's diamond cutting and polishing industry, and that means any disruption. That means it will disrupt the livelihoods of hundreds of thousands working in the small diamond firms in India, particularly in Surat.
And the ban will also affect Indian exports. India exports more than 40% of these polished diamonds to the G7 nations. And in 2023, India's share of exports accounted for about $22 billion. And the top three importers were the US, Hong Kong and UAE.
The G7's ban has not received wide support. Vipul Shah, chairman of India's Gem Jewellery Export Promotion Council, a major Indian trade body, said, and I'm quoting here, "We are not happy with the announced timeline for implementation of restrictions."
On the other hand, several diamond analysts have pointed out that if Indian companies want to continue business with the G7, they will have to play their part. Looking ahead, the G7 aims to introduce a traceability-based verification for rough diamonds by September.
All right, temperatures are running high in the Korean peninsula. South Korea and Japan dispatched their fighter jets here in the region.
And in response to Russian and Chinese jets entering Seoul's air defense zone unannounced, but despite this intrusion, the planes did not violate South Korea's territorial space.
Well, South Korea says 4 Russian and 2 Chinese bombers entered its air defense identification zone over the Sea of Japan, also called as East Sea. The incident happened around 11:53 a.m. local time on Thursday, and by 12:10 p.m. the planes left the area. According to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, the country has raised its concerns about movement of Chinese aircraft with Beijing, while it did not do the same with Russia.
And the last time such an incident happened was actually in June, when Russian and Chinese planes were conducting joint patrols over Sea of Japan and entered South Korea's airspace.
According to the International Civil Aviation Organization, an ADIZ is usually an area where countries may unilaterally demand for foreign aircraft to take measures for identification. Unlike the national airspace, there are no international laws that govern air defense zones. Temperatures are running high. Of course. Now, what we are bringing you next is a Vladimir Putin update, which we're bringing you from Russia. Now, what is happening is deepfake. Of course, that is the problem, which is a major issue in Russia. With the help of artificial intelligence, real-life digital avatars can be created. They look and sound like the real person. Well, Russian President Vladimir Putin has had a first-hand experience of this.
Yes, and when he faced an AI-generated deepfake on himself during a question-and-answer session with the public, take a look when the double took the opportunity to put a question to Putin about artificial intelligence.
Владимир Владимирович, здравствуйте. Я студент и учусь в Санкт-Петербургском государственном университете. Хочу спросить, правда ли, что у вас много двойников? И еще, как вы относитесь к тем опасностям, которые несет в нашу жизнь искусственный интеллект и нейросети? Спасибо.
Вот я смотрю, вы можете быть на меня похожи и говорите моим голосом. Но я подумал и решил, что похожим на себя и говорить моим голосом должен только один человек. И этим человеком буду я. Вот так один из наших деятелей шутил когда-то. Вот. Но что касается искусственного интеллекта, да, вот это мой первый двойник, кстати сказать.
Now, in other news, since October 27, Myanmar's ruling military and rebel groups have been in a state of war. The fighting has led to the displacement of over 300,000 civilians in the last 2 months only.
Now, Beijing has claimed to ensure a temporary ceasefire between Myanmar junta and ethnic minority armed groups. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says that the parties in Myanmar have agreed to a temporary ceasefire and to maintain dialogue and will exercise maximum restraint here.
Myanmar's military says that it met with rebels and other parties in the conflict, and the officials, without elaborating, even confirmed that another round of talks was due by the end of this month.
The fighting, which largely commenced in northern Shan state, has displaced more than 2 million people since Myanmar's military coup in February of 2021, confirmed the United Nations. Now, the rebel groups have attacked several Myanmar military positions, but what worried neighboring China is that the rebels have also threatened many border points which are crucial for trade and commerce. Analysts describe the onslaught by the rebel groups as the biggest military challenge to the junta since it seized power in 2021.
Now, the rebel alliance comprises 3 groups: the Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army, the Taang National Liberation Army, and the Arakan Army. Now, the rebel group's alliance has taken over 200 military positions, including several towns in Shan and western Rakhine state, since the beginning of the offensive dubbed Operation 1027.
Updates from India. 8 months since ethnic clashes shook India's northeastern state of Manipur, bodies of 64 victims have been returned to their families.
And these unclaimed bodies were lying in morgues till now, but the Supreme Court of India had instructed the government of Manipur to ensure that the last rites are held. The dead bodies were airlifted amid tight security arrangements from the capital Imphal, and this happened under the watch of state police and the Indian Army.
In August, the Supreme Court of India had formed a committee of 3 former High Court judges to look into the investigation, relief and rehabilitation in violence-stricken Manipur. After the committee presented its report, the top court directed the Manipur government to make arrangements for dignified burial of unidentified victims. As per committee's report, so far 175 people lost their lives due to these clashes, out of which bodies of 169 people were identified.
Manipur has been brought by ethnic clashes between the violence until now and has claimed 195 lives and displaced around 60,000 people. And let's now take a look at some of the major developments from around the world of technology.
Starting with Pope Francis, who's called for world leaders to adopt a global treaty on the use of artificial intelligence to ensure it is used in an ethical manner. After all, Pope Francis himself has been the subject of several AI-generated images. Remember the photo that went viral on social media recently? Well, it showed him wearing a huge white puffer coat. The 86-year-old pontiff has made the appeal in a 6-page message published ahead of the Catholic Church's World Day of Peace, which this year is focused on the theme of AI. While he welcomes advances in science and technology that have reduced human suffering, he also highlights that the dangers of using AI, which are facing everybody. Now, AI can be used to threaten people, it can be used to damage reputation, it can be used to spread disinformation and interfere in elections. According to the Pope, in the quest for absolute freedom, we risk falling into the spiral of technological dictatorship.
And he calls for binding international treaty to regulate the development and use of AI, and the goal should be to prevent harm and share good practice. The European Commission has asked technology giants Apple and Google to clarify their App Store risk management. The Commission is requesting them to provide more information on how they have diligently identified any systemic risks concerning the App Store and Google Play. Now, the two firms have been given a January 15th deadline to reply. Both Google and Apple are part of a group of over a dozen of the world's biggest tech companies facing unprecedented legal scrutiny since the Digital Services Act came into force this year. Now, the Act aims to tackle illegal content and online security risks. The EU's list of questions also concerns transparency-related issues linked to recommender systems and online advertisements. The Commission said, adding that potential next steps include the opening of a formal proceeding.
Going toe-to-toe with a robot in the boxing ring may still be in the realm of science fiction, but at the Institute for Human and Machine Cognition in Florida, researchers say it is the perfect way to test their humanoid robot, Nadia. IHMC Robotics Lab, in collaboration with Boardwalk Robotics, has unveiled the robot's prowess by showcasing Nadia engaging in a sparring session with a human opponent. During the fight, Nadia was being teleoperated by a fellow scientist and guided by virtual reality control. Now, this demonstrates the potential for human-controlled robot avatars. It's believed that robots like Nadia could be used to navigate indoor spaces and mirror human adaptability to challenges like stairs, ladders, and debris.
Now, moving on to the world of business, a UN study reveals the staggering economic toll of the Israel-Hamas war on neighboring Arab countries.
The report projects a $10 billion impact this year, pushing over 230,000 people into poverty. And these Arab nations are already grappling with fiscal pressures, slow growth and steep unemployment, now face a severe economic challenge exacerbated by the ongoing conflict.
And the scale of destruction in Gaza within a brief time frame is unprecedented since World War II. And the conflict has resulted in the loss of 45 to 50% of all housing in just 1 month. Over 18,000 lives have been confirmed lost, marking a level of devastation surpassing even the 5-year Syrian conflict. The mass displacement of nearly 80% of Gaza's population further underscores the gravity of the situation.
The UN Development Programme, through a commissioned study, warns that the economic cost could double if the conflict persists for another 6 months. Now, the UN is reaching out to development funds and multilateral financial institutions for reconstruction efforts. In a bid to crack down on the rising egg prices gripping the nation, Russia's economy ministry has unveiled a groundbreaking strategy now.
And a 6-month exemption on duties for 1.2 billion egg imports aims to stabilize the market and alleviate the strain on consumers. As some Moscow supermarkets grapple with empty shelves and residents notice a significant uptick in prices, the nation watches closely. Take a look at this next report for more.
Moscow supermarkets are feeling the impact of the egg shortage. Shelves stand empty, reflecting the strain on the domestic supply. The measure aims to counteract the double-digit inflation experienced in 2022, providing short-term relief and ensuring a steady growth in supply. However, not all shops have been equally affected, with online availability still widespread. In Yekaterinburg, residents report a noticeable increase in egg prices, with some types seeing a surge of 30 to 40 rubles.
Well, the prices grew by 30 rubles, some types of eggs even by 40 rubles. Yesterday my husband bought eggs for 92 rubles in our shop, and in other shops prices are up to 120 to 130 rubles. But what should we do? I don't think there's anything scary for me in all of this.
They told me they didn't have the new stock. I asked them, but in general you can find the eggs. They are available in specialist stores. So it has not disappeared completely. You can find it in some shops.
This regional perspective underscores the broader economic challenges Russia has been grappling with, particularly high inflation rates. The government's decision to temporarily exempt egg imports from duties is a nuanced attempt to balance market dynamics and ease the financial burden on consumers amid these economic uncertainties. In a move to address this surge, Russia's economy ministry has implemented a bold strategy. Effective from January 1st to June 30th, the government will waive duties on 1.2 billion egg imports. This decision is a response to the more than 40% increase in egg prices this year, causing concerns among consumers and leading to empty shelves in some Moscow supermarkets. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Now let's get you some updates from the world of sports. Captain Surya Kumar Yadav smashed a brilliant century and birthday boy Kuldeep Yadav picked a 5-wicket haul as India thrashed South Africa by 106 runs in the third T20 international.
Well, the victory means that the 3-match series ended 1-1 after the opening game was washed out. South Africa's captain Aiden Markram won the toss and surprisingly put India into bat first in batting-friendly conditions. Openers Shubman Gill and Yashasvi Jaiswal raced to 29 runs in the first 2 overs. Markram threw the ball to spinner Keshav Maharaj in the third over and he dismissed Gill for 8 before removing Tilak Verma for a golden duck. Now, Jaiswal rebuilt the innings from there with Yadav. The southpaw found the boundaries with ease while Yadav was happy to play the second fiddle. Jaiswal completed his 50 in 34 balls before being dismissed for 60 with 141 runs on board in 14 overs. Yadav had switched gears by then. The captain took 32 balls to reach his 50, but the next 50 runs came off just 23 balls. Yadav, with his 4th century, equalled Rohit Sharma and Glenn Maxwell's record for most T20 international runs.
And Yadav's swashbuckling innings powered India to 201 for 7. Pacer Mohammad Siraj got the ball to swing under the lights at the Wanderers and bowled a maiden first over. Now, the pressure of a big chase got to openers Reza Hendricks and Matthew Britisk, who threw their wickets, and the hosts were already struggling at 42 for 4 in the 7th over before spinner Yadav spun his magic. Now, the Chinaman ran through the middle low order as South Africa's batters imploded. The other finished with career best figures of 5 for 17 as the hosts were bundled out for 95 in the 14th over, suffering their third biggest defeat in the shortest format.
That's one for the Stratos. It's a terrific performance by India today, led of course by Surya Kumar, who hasn't been out there actually in the field.
The shortlists for the best FIFA awards are out. In the men's category, the fight will once again be among Argentina's World Cup winning captain Lionel Messi, reigning UEFA's Men's Player of the Year Erling Haaland, and France captain Kylian Mbappe.
And while Aitana, Jennifer Hermoso and Linda are the nominees for the Women's Award, the 36-year-old Messi is the current holder of the FIFA Best Men's Player Award and could become the first man in history to claim the trophy thrice. And in order to do so, he will have to fend off competition from familiar foes Haaland and Mbappe, and like he did in October when he lifted his record-extending eighth trophy. But what could work against him is that the qualifying period for this award begins on December 19th. Now, a day after Messi led Argentina to their third World Cup crown.
Another reason that he is not the outright favourite is Erling Haaland. The Norwegian had a record-breaking 2022-23 season with Manchester City and was crowned the UEFA Men's Player of the Year in treble. The 23
And France captain Mbappe, who finished second behind Messi last time, has also been included in the three-man shortlist. During the qualifying period, Mbappe scored 17 goals in 20 matches and helped PSG win their latest league title.
With the Women's World Cup